It's one of the most haunting pieces of evidence ever released in a murder case, not because of what it shows, but because of what it captures in a single moment. A moment where everything changes. A short video, recorded by one of the victims, a man walking toward them, on an abandoned railroad bridge, high above the ground. A place where movement is slow, careful, and controlled. There is nowhere to run quickly, no easy escape, only forward or back. And then, a voice. Calm, measured, almost routine. "Guys, down the hill." 4 words. But for investigators, those words would become something far more significant because they weren't emotional, they weren't chaotic, they were controlled. And that control would raise questions that would take years to answer. February 13th, 2017, Delphi, Indiana, a town of just a few thousand people, the kind of place where everyone knows each other, where routines rarely change, and where serious crime is not expected. That afternoon, 2 best friends, 14-year-old Liberty German and 13-year-old Abigail Williams, were dropped off near the Monon High Bridge Trail. It was a normal plan, a short walk, time together, photos along the bridge. They planned to be picked up later that day. Nothing about the situation suggested danger. Nothing about that afternoon stood out, until later, when everything would be re-examined. The Monon High Bridge is not an ordinary path. It's elevated, exposed. The wooden planks are uneven, gaps between them, no guardrails. Walking across it requires attention, balance, awareness. It slows you down. For anyone standing there, movement is limited, and control of the situation becomes important. At some point during their walk, something shifted. There's no clear signal of panic, no immediate reaction, but something was wrong. Liberty German sensed it. Not enough to run instantly, but enough to act. She took out her phone and began recording. That decision was not random, it was instinct. And it would later become one of the most critical pieces of evidence in the case. The man in the video moves with purpose. Not fast, not aggressive, but direct. Head slightly down, hands in his pockets. His posture suggests control, familiarity. There is no hesitation. And that detail would later stand out to investigators. Later that afternoon, the girls didn't return. At first, there was no immediate panic. Delays happen, phones lose signal, plans change. But as time passed, that explanation became less likely. Calls were made, family members began searching, and the situation escalated quickly. Search teams were organized, volunteers joined. The area was not large, it was familiar terrain. There was confidence that they would be found quickly. But as daylight faded and night took over, that confidence began to shift. The next day, the search ended. Near Deer Creek, their bodies were found. The moment that information was confirmed, everything changed. This was no longer a missing persons case. This was a double homicide, and from that point forward, every detail mattered. Investigators began building the case, the location, the timeline, the evidence, and most importantly, the recording. Because this case had something most do not, a suspect captured on video and audio. Police made a decision. They released the image, a still from the video, the man on the bridge. He became known as Bridge Guy. The image spread quickly. News broadcasts, social media, national attention, millions of people saw him. Tips flooded in, more than 18,000. Each one had to be reviewed, each possibility considered. But none of them led to a confirmed identification, and that's where the case began to stall. Days became months, months became years, and the case remained unsolved. For investigators, this is where the pressure intensifies. Because the evidence exists, the suspect is visible, the voice is recorded, and yet, no resolution. Unsolved cases don't fade, they stay, they replay, they follow you. Every decision is revisited, every missed detail questioned. And over time, the case becomes something more than work. It becomes weight. Then, in October 2022, something changed. Richard Allen was arrested, a local resident, someone who had lived in Delphi for years, someone who had been present from the beginning. This is the moment that changes everything. Because it forces a question that is difficult to accept. How do you miss someone? Who was always there? Prosecutors focused on key evidence, a bullet found at the scene, not fired, but cycled through a firearm. That firearm belonged to Allen. This type of evidence is subtle, but significant because it connects an object to a specific weapon. Allen also placed himself at the scene, On the trail, at a critical time, combined with other details, investigators built a timeline that pointed directly toward him. Then came the statements, recorded conversations, phone calls, moments where Allen allegedly admitted involvement. For prosecutors, this reinforced the case. But the defense challenged everything. No DNA, questions about evidence handling, concerns about investigative pressure. Because in court, certainty must be absolute. In 2024, the case finally went to trial. Years after the murders, years after the video, years after the case became widely known, the focus shifted from speculation to proof. The jury reached a decision. Guilty. Richard Allen was convicted. But even after the conviction, the case didn't feel finished, because some cases don't end when they're solved. For Delphi, this changed everything. A quiet town lost its sense of safety. Families lost 2 daughters. Investigators carried something that didn't disappear, because in the end, this case was never just about evidence. It was about time, uncertainty, and the psychological cost of not having answers. And even now, that moment on the bridge still lingers. Not as a mystery anymore, but as a reminder of how long the truth can remain just out of reach. I'm Daniel, and this was A Crime Story.